Sometimes it feels like understanding should arrive as a moment, like a click, like something finally locking into place and giving the mind permission to rest. But what I've noticed instead is that the closer something comes to being complete, the quieter it becomes. Not dramatic, not illuminating, almost disappointing in a strange way, as if the mind keeps waiting for fireworks while reality is slowly switching the lights off. And maybe that's where this really begins, not with a question, but with the fatigue of having carried too many answers for too long. The subtle exhaustion that comes when explanations stop feeling nourishing and start feeling repetitive. Like chewing on the same thought again and again, hoping it will taste different this time. You can spend years collecting explanations about the world, about consciousness, about why anything exists at all, stacking ideas carefully, refining them, polishing them, until one day nothing new arrives. The questions still appear, but they don't carry the same weight anymore. They feel thinner, less urgent, like echoes bouncing around a room that's already empty. And this is where the Brahma Sūtra seems to stand. Not at the beginning of inquiry, but at the point where inquiry starts folding back into itself, where the mind turns around and begins to look at the one who has been asking all along. And I might be wrong, but it doesn't feel like a text trying to explain reality. It feels like something quietly checking whether you still need explanations at all. Most philosophies give the mind something to hold, a structure, a system, a ladder to climb. But the Brahma Sūtra feels more like someone asking why you are still climbing when the ground never disappeared. Because by the time you arrive here, you've already passed through so many maps. Matter separated from consciousness, logic proving its own limits, ritual revealing invisible order. Each system offering clarity and then gently exposing its own edge. And slowly an uncomfortable realization begins to form that every tool which helped you see was also keeping you slightly distant. Because even knowledge, at a certain depth, becomes a veil. Non-duality here doesn't arrive as a grand declaration or a spiritual achievement. It arrives almost reluctantly, like something the mind would rather not accept, because it leaves nothing left to improve, nothing left to chase, nothing left to fix. The Brahma Sutra doesn't announce oneness, it simply keeps questioning separation until separation runs out of reasons to exist. And what's unsettling is that the questions don't disappear. They just stop pointing outward. They begin circling back toward the sense of I that has been quietly assumed this entire time. At some point, the inquiry becomes almost embarrassing, like asking a mirror to explain your own face. And the mind begins to notice that every attempt to grasp reality is itself part of reality, that the seeker is not outside what is being sought, and this realization doesn't feel blissful or dramatic, it feels ordinary, almost too ordinary, like noticing you've been breathing the same air you were searching for somewhere else, and suddenly the whole effort of understanding feels slightly misplaced, not wrong, just unnecessary. This is why the Brahma Sutra doesn't end with answers. It ends with exhaustion. Not the tiredness of failure, but the tiredness of completion. The kind that comes when there is nothing left to resolve, because what remains cannot be improved or removed. It can only be noticed. And even that word feels inaccurate, because noticing still suggests a doer, a witness standing apart. But here even witnessing softens. Even awareness stops performing. And what remains doesn't announce itself as truth. It simply refuses to leave. And yet, something curious happens here. Because when the metaphysical inquiry finally quiets down, when the mind stops trying to escape or transcend, attention naturally begins to fall back into the body, not as an identity, but as a living interface, a place where this non-dual understanding has to express itself. Because realization that doesn't touch breath, posture, sensation, nervous system isn't complete. It remains abstract, floating, ungrounded. It's almost ironic that after dissolving everything into oneness, the journey turns back toward muscles, spine, breath, heat, balance, discipline. Because the body was never the obstacle, it was the instrument waiting to be tuned. And this is where the next movement begins quietly forming, not as philosophy, but as practice, not as inquiry, but as alignment. As if understanding now asks a different question, not what is real, but can this realization live here, in this body, in this breath, in this moment? And maybe that's why what follows doesn't contradict non-duality at all. It completes it in a different language, one made of posture, effort, stillness, and subtle control. Because if consciousness has nowhere to land, it remains incomplete. And so the journey continues, not upward or outward, but downward into embodiment, into the disciplined intelligence of the body itself, where the Hatha Yoga Paritika waits quietly, not to explain reality, but to prepare the vessel that must live it.